Fast travel. It's ingrained in the very DNA of so many of our favorite games. Since Dragon Quest debuted in 1986, fast travel has grown to be somewhat of an expectation in any game with a sense of free exploration. It's what allows us to quickly return to locations to upgrade our characters, quickly proceed from mission to mission, and cut out the tedium of traveling back and forth over the same area multiple times. I mean, The Hobbit romanticized the idea of the journey there and back again, not the idea of the journey there and back and there and back and Adventure is fun and all, but for many games, at a certain point, that sense of adventure eventually reduces down to a feeling of repetition. Fast travel helps nip that repetition in the bud and keep the fun flowing. For many people, maybe even most people, fast travel is an essential tool that helps you get more of the things you love in a game and less of the things you don't. But what happens when that tool becomes a crutch? When it comes to our virtual adventures, what do we lose when we rely too heavily on fast travel? We've reached the point where what was once a convenience, fast travel has now become a hindrance that often robs us of the very things that make video games great. Sometimes the developer relies too heavily on it, and other times the player uses it too much. But either way, the result is the same: an overused fast travel that breaks immersion, robs us of beautiful scenery, and undermines exploration. But truly, this is a conclusion that I've only just now come to. For a long time, fast travel was just part of gaming to me. It felt like an intrinsic part of the experience. I see now, though, that I fell into the trap of what's called the law of the instrument, a cognitive bias often attributed to Professor of Philosophy Abraham Kaplan. In 1964, Kaplan stated that the law of the instrument is as follows, quote, "Give a small boy a hammer and he will find that everything he encounters needs pounding." I see now that I have been that small boy and that fast travel has acted as my hammer. For as long as I can remember, in games like Assassin's Creed, the first thing I would do is go out and unlock every fast travel point. My train of thought was that if I first went out and unlocked every single synchronization point, then I'd be much more efficient for the remainder of the game. I'd make it easier to get through games faster. New mission in a faraway area? No bother, I can just fast travel there. Need to go to a vendor at a nearby town? Easy peasy, I can just fast travel there. Because I had this tool, fast travel, I'd look for every and any chance to use it. It just made sense to me. Especially in a game like Skyrim or even more recently Crimson Desert, fast travel always felt like the way to go. Fast travel allowed me to cut out the tedium of traveling, and it kept me safe when low leveled. I didn't have to worry about dealing with any baddies on the way, and I could get right to my destination without ever worrying about the journey. For very good reason, using fast travel always just felt logical to me. I used to think that people who played games like Fallout and Skyrim in survival mode were masochists. I thought they loved torturing themselves. Why would you ever want to fast travel on foot when it's so much easier to just teleport there? Maybe that's because that's where the game is. The game is in the in-between. It's the small things you discover, the new sights that blow you away, the growing sense of familiarity that can only be gained through constant adventure that makes gaming worthwhile. But for so long, I never saw it that way, and I bet many of you don't see it that way either. It's taken years to see the error in that train of thought, but I can pinpoint the exact moment that frame of mind began to break down. The most anticipated game of my life so far was Red Dead Redemption 2. If you watched my video on the magic of the open world game, which I highly recommend because it's the piece of writing that I'm most proud of, then you already know that Red Dead Redemption was incredibly instrumental in the formation of myself. So it only stands to reason then that I would be over the moon about Red Dead Redemption 2. Over the moon I was, and when the game dropped, I was immediately hooked. I sunk weeks of my life into that game. I loved living life in the Old West, exploring and really soaking in the game's atmosphere. I loved how the game forced me to take it slow and how the game did everything in its power to keep me engaged, including heavily restricting fast travel. There are a few ways you can fast travel in Red Dead Redemption 2, but it's not nearly as accessible or convenient as it is in other games. At first, I expected to hate this, and for a while I did, but that all changed after the famous mission A Quiet Time. This is maybe the most famous mission from Red Dead Redemption 2. You know, the one where you go get drunk with Lenny. It's in the aftermath of that mission that the lack of fast travel really shows you how it can make the game more immersive. After your night out on the town with Lenny, you wake up miles away from your camp, miles away from your horse, with your only remaining option being to walk back on foot. I gotta admit, man, I was pissed at first. I mean, how could they expect me to walk all the way back? Do I look like Forrest Gump to you? Like, do I? I was so mad to be inconvenienced in such a way, but that anger didn't last for long at all. After only a few minutes into my trek, I began to have fun again. I was still awestruck by the game's beautiful visuals, and this gave me time to soak it in. Plus, on my way back, I got time to pay close attention to the game's wildlife and see how amazing Rockstar is at creating these seemingly alive biomes. But the cherry on top was when a wagon drove by, offering me a ride to the nearest town. I didn't even know this feature existed, and if fast travel was a large part of the game then, I'd never have learned about it. So I hopped on the wagon, rode off toward Valentine, and had one of the most immersive bits of gaming I'd ever had, thanks to the game's lack of fast travel. Now, I will say that the end of Red Dead Redemption 2 feels mighty recursive, and that you're constantly riding your horse back and forth across the same handful of locations. That does get tedious. But honestly, that represents such a small portion of the game that it doesn't feel like it would be worth the addition of fast travel at the cost of the immersion that would be lost. Red Dead Redemption 2's immersion is much better due to its lack of fast travel. I can already hear what you're saying though. Fast travel can be immersive. There are so many games with immersive fast travel in it. I mean, even Red Dead Redemption 2, in that game, you can take stagecoaches or trains from town to town. And you're so right. In games like Red Dead Redemption 2 with its trains, or Spider-Man with its subway system, or the metro system in Cyberpunk, are these all trains? Doesn't matter. The point is that there are a handful of games that implement fast travel in meaningful, mindful, and immersive ways, and it's hard to say that the inclusion of fast travel in these games breaks immersion in any way. And you know what? I largely agree with that. The issue is that, one, even still in the best designed video games, an over-reliance on these mechanics by the player is still immersion breaking. And more importantly, number two, games with immersive fast travel are nowhere near the majority. The signposts in The Witcher 3 make little contextual sense and can really break the immersion of adventuring across one of gaming's most beautiful open worlds. In Skyrim, the Dragonborn has a buttload of powers, but teleportation isn't one of them, and the reliance on fast travel can be quite immersion breaking, especially considering how densely packed Skyrim is. The best fast travel systems are contextualized, immersion building, and experience enhancing, but they're also few and far between. Games, like Assassin's Creed for example, often treat fast travel like a crutch, and thus influence the player to use it as a crutch as well, breaking immersion in the process. When that sense of immersion is maintained, it reduces the need to fast travel, even if the game presents it as an option. When you do stay immersed, you begin to appreciate the small things the game has to offer, like the NPCs, the exploration, and the beautiful scenery, which, speaking of, is another aspect of gaming majorly undermined by fast travel. On July 17, 2020, Sucker Punch released a game very near to my heart, Ghost of Tsushima. 6 years ago, we weren't overflowing with an abundance of samurai games the way we are now. In 2020, Ghost of Tsushima was a welcome surprise. A new samurai adventure that I had wanted for so long was finally here. Better yet, it was inspired by Assassin's Creed, so leading up to launch, I was intending to play this like I would any Assassin's Creed game. For the longest, I knew that the thing I intended to do in Ghost of Tsushima would be to unlock all of the game's fast travel points. But that all changed when I watched one of the many reviews I poured over leading up to the game's release, where the reviewer described Ghost of Tsushima as the only open world game where they frequently opted to walk on foot instead of gallop on horse, just to soak in the atmosphere. Hold on a second, did you just say you walked everywhere instead of using your horse on purpose? To soak in the atmosphere? It was so antithetical to my way of playing that it kind of blew my mind. Maybe it's because of my ADHD, but I often find myself struggling with any wasted time. If you don't have ADHD, then you probably don't know this, but people who do have it suffer from a symptom called time blindness, which is a symptom where we struggle to gauge how much time has passed. I was diagnosed with ADHD at a very young age, so I've been hyper aware of time blindness, and as a result, I try to get things done as fast as possible so that I don't mistakenly waste any precious time or show up somewhere late. This happens in my real life and it happens in video games too, but at least I have a good internal clock now. Anyway, to hear that this guy say that he intentionally goes slower just to soak it all in did not compute in my ADHD brain. But then I remembered Red Dead Redemption 2 and how much I loved that walk back after drinking with Lenny. That then made me wonder, wait, have I ever intentionally tried to soak in a game's atmosphere at all? The answer was an easy no. Even when it did happen, it would only be for a second and then I would move on. That mission in Red Dead Redemption 2 was the longest I ever just soaked in a game's atmosphere. That realization that I've never taken the time to soak in everything a game was trying to show me made me then realize that maybe I've been robbing myself of a core part of my gaming experiences this entire time. So with Ghost of Tsushima, the only time I fast traveled was to upgrade my character. My horse? Basically non-existent. Starting off, I wasn't sure whether I'd like playing this way, but I very quickly found myself falling in love with it. Taking my time made my experience mesh really well with the game's meditative tone and allowed me to soak in the beauty all around me. It allowed me to wave with the glorious green grass, lose myself within the vibrant hues of the cherry blossom, and be swept away alongside the leaves in the wind. Because I took it slow, I found much more enjoyment in Ghost of Tsushima than I might have otherwise, and this isn't a game with insanely rewarding exploration either. It's not jam-packed with things to discover and loot to grab. There's the occasional enemy, or the occasional meditation spot, or maybe a piece of headgear, but those weren't the incentive to abstain from fast travel. It was the game's beautiful scenery, and that was enough. Honestly though, Ghost of Tsushima is a bit of an exception in this case. Usually, beautiful scenery isn't nearly reason enough to trek it out on foot. The reason that it works in Ghost of Tsushima is that the quests are laid out in a way that they're constantly pushing the player forward across the map. The game rewards exploration, with that reward being the beautiful new scenery, and that works because the game is only around 20 hours long. Compare this to something like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where it can easily take over 100 hours to complete the game, and the scenery no longer feels like an award. Without rewarding exploration, fast travel begins to feel like an absolute necessity. When fast travel is an absolute necessity, then everything else begins to fall apart. Your immersion never gets a chance to really form, you miss out on the few things that actually are there for you to discover, and you're left wondering if maybe this game wouldn't be better as a linear game. Open world games should have rewarding exploration, and when they don't, I cannot blame you for using fast travel. That being said, even if it's not the player's fault for the overuse of fast travel, it's clear that fast travel was used as a prop in development, resulting in a worse gaming experience. When games do have rewarding exploration though, is when fast travel is the biggest detriment to how you might experience a game. Take Crimson Desert for example. Crimson Desert is a huge game, by far the largest game map I've ever had the pleasure of exploring. But because it's so big, I often found myself relying on fast travel to get around. I didn't mind that at first because it felt efficient, but after a while something happened. I began to see other people's discoveries all over the internet, things I was completely missing. Assuming fast travel was the cause, I then made it my goal to fast travel as infrequently as possible. When I did, I began to discover so much more than I previously did, even on roads that I had already crossed. I found new statues being built, relics of the abyss, giant skeletons, hidden treasure, and way more that I completely passed over by using fast travel. This is when it finally hit me that fast travel has actively been making my gaming experiences worse. In densely packed games like Crimson Desert, Skyrim, and even Starfield, you miss out on so much of what's supposed to be magic by fast traveling everywhere. The best side quest in a game could be hidden behind a traveler that you can only meet by walking at a certain place at a certain time. The best armor might be hidden by some waterfall somewhere that you pass by. The coolest place of interest might only be found in the forest off the beaten path towards your next destination. And you would miss all of this if you decided to fast travel everywhere. At the same time, in most of these games, fast traveling often feels like a necessity. In Crimson Desert, it was much easier to manage Greymanes from my camp than from my in-game map, so I had to fast travel back there constantly if I didn't want to make the same journey dozens of times. In Skyrim, even though I loved adventuring, I still needed to fast travel to merchants if I didn't want to make the same journey dozens of times. These developers recognized the need for a rich and dense world to drive exploration, but even still, they relied on fast travel as a means to upgrade your character. This is a major design flaw plaguing many games today, and that's what makes Ghost of Yote's approach so smart. Instead of having to go to merchants yourself, the merchants come to you, reducing the need for recursive journeys and thus the need for fast travel. Either way, it's becoming clear, we need to fast travel less. Sometimes it's the fault of the developer, and other times it's our own reliance, but either way, a reliance on fast travel is ruining how we experience games. It definitely breaks immersion when implemented poorly, and it can still break immersion when implemented well, but used too frequently. Fast travel robs us of beautiful scenery, but even when a game does have beautiful scenery, they aren't always structured in a way to be rewarding, creating another reliance. More than anything, fast travel severely undermines exploration, but sometimes, even when a game does have rewarding exploration, the game is still designed in a way that leans heavily on fast travel. Needless to say, even though we've identified an issue, we don't quite yet have a solution. There is no getting rid of fast traveling entirely, but if we're more mindful of our use going forward, then we can make sure we don't all fall victim to the law of the instrument. If gamers and developers both view fast travel as a tool rather than a crutch, then we'll learn how to use our hammer to make our experience better than turning everything else into a nail. What do you think about the current state of fast travel? Let me know down below, let's talk about it, and just remember, content like mine wouldn't be possible without viewers like you. Thank you.